and welcome to another episode of the Empowered Hormones podcast. I'm so stoked to have you guys here today because we are chatting about juggling low toxic living and kind of combining that with being a mum, because we know that life can be crazy and stressful and busy, and to be low tox as well as all the things is quite a big ask, I feel like. So today we have the privilege of speaking to Sarah, or if you follow her on Instagram, she's otherwise known as the founder of Lox Toxin Rabbit. So thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's a great opportunity to have a chat about my story and to share kind of where I've come from and where I am now with others, because I know that going low tox is very, very overwhelming at times. So
I find it overwhelming, and I'm a single. It's just me, and I'm like, how hard can it be, kind of thing. But then when I started looking into it, and I was like, oh my, skincare kind of made sense for me in a way. I was like, oh yeah, because I struggle with acne and psoriasis. I've always been really conscious of it. But then when I start looking into cooking plans and plastics and then tea, and then when I saw that post the other day about condoms and like tampons and all this stuff, and I was like,
yeah,
holy moly, it's just a big black hole.
it really is. We're kind of getting thrown, I guess, like so many environmental toxins from so many directions as well. And it's sort of like, what do I focus on? Where do I start? Where do I begin? I guess I was lucky when I started out because I wasn't privileged to all this information that's currently online.
Yeah.
I was just working with a holistic doctor. So it was very, I was able to incrementally add things in. And as I learned more, I would add and change my lifestyle and how I was doing things.
So let's step it back then, because otherwise I'm just going to nail you with questions straight up, and people are like, who is this chick? So you are a mum of three and you're a previous health advisor. So your passion now is obviously helping to share what you've learned about detoxifying your lives and encourage others to understand more sort of about what we're putting in our bodies. But where did this whole journey start? What kind of health crisis, quote unquote, were you in, or what pushed you to go down this low tox pathway?
Well, I actually was diagnosed in my early 20s with Graves' disease, and I was taking lots of medication. I was constantly tired. I was really fatigued. In my 20s, I couldn't go out and socialize in the same way my friends were. And I was really, really struggling with that. And I felt like a lot of the medication was actually making things worse. And so then when we moved on to starting to thinking about having kids ourselves, well, I kind of had made a commitment that I didn't want to be on medication. So we went to the endocrinologist, and the only solution he could offer me is radiotherapy on my thyroid, which I kind of inherently knew wasn't quite right for me. And so we decided to sort of advice from my wonderful mother-in-law, actually, who had a friend who had been seeing a holistic doctor, said, why don't you try this? Why don't you go see a holistic doctor and find the root cause of your Graves' disease rather than just treating the symptoms? So that's kind of where it all began. And so I went through a holistic doctor, and they found out that I actually had quite high mercury levels and other heavy metals, which was possibly causing a lot of my symptoms. And so I went through a heavy metal detox and went through and changed a lot of my lifestyle. So I removed processed foods and started eating really whole foods as well, because I was very guilty as a young person eating pretty terribly. I remember that I used to be able to, my aim was to find the cheapest food I could eat. So that might have been like a pack of pie. I used to be able to get this big bag of pies for $20, and I'd live off those for the week, which is not how you want to look after your health. But anyway, so I did a lot of damage in my early years at uni and things like that as well. And so anyway, I basically went through that big detox, and my health I was medication free. I was able to wean off all my medications as well, and my blood pressure was perfect. And so then we obviously went on to have our lovely children. And again, my blood pressure was perfect. My thyroid was perfect. And so by doing all that groundwork and making those big lifestyle changes, I was able to really, truly transform my health, which has been amazing. But I have also learned a lot on the journey of motherhood, because we're people that don't really stop very well. We don't rest, and we don't sort of take in what we're actually doing. So I kind of learned, again, another lesson after having three babies quite close together, and I've kind of ended up with postnatal depletion. And so I wasn't getting the right nutrients and vitamins into my system because I was so busy with three little people. And I've learned so much on this kind of secondary journey as well, of how much we do need to look after our bodies as a mum. And so like when I got to that point of, I guess, healing my Graves' disease, I didn't know it all, and I'm still making mistakes along the way now.
Yeah, there's so many things that I want to unpack there. The first thing is when you did the heavy metal stuff, because I love that, because I remember doing a hair trace mineral analysis, and I'm not sure how you picked up heavy metals in the body. Was it hair or was it something?
Yeah, it was here. Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was. Yeah.
It's super interesting and fascinating information. And like I just find there are so many women, because I was the same, like all the mercury and stuff in there. And I'd been a uni student and a lot of tin food, and I had
Oh, yes.
yeah, so much tin tuna. So bad. But like all that stuff, you don't realize the build-up and the effects of those in your body. And sure, like small amounts, kind of like plastics, like small amounts here and there aren't going to be detrimental to one person's health, but a build-up, or if you're already in a health crisis and then you've got this
Mm.
other stuff on top of it, or you're then a depleted mum, or you're super flat out or whatever, and your body's in that go state, and then you're putting all these extra toxins on it. Like you're asking a lot of your body.
Yeah, definitely. And you're doing the opposite to supporting it. Like when you're stressed, your liver and things aren't going to function as well. But yeah, it was amazing to find, because heavy metals was never on my radar and I never really made the link. And I was actually doing a lot of work I was working at university and working at Bunnings Warehouse, and I used to break, you would know in Australia what Bunnings Warehouse is. Well, I used to break fluorescent bulbs, like those energy saver bulbs, all the time. And they're really heavy in mercury. And you would just, I didn't even think twice of it. There are no warnings. You don't really know. People aren't aware of the exposure and where you're getting it from. Like you said, the tin fish. I used to eat a lot of tin fish as a uni student too. So
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's really, really interesting. But people
So
have
that
really
was
low awareness
Yeah,
about
so
that.
that was kind of the start of it for you. Like you sort of had that health journey and those kinds of things. So then what about after kids, when you ended up so depleted in nutrients and vitamins of that postnatal depletion? Like how did you get yourself from there kind of to where you are now then?
Yeah, so I basically, we were so busy with by the time we had our third child, and it kind of got to the point where my skin was so bad. Like I haven't probably really shared this much with people, but I had like rashes all over my arms, and I'm now all clear, which is amazing. But my body was showing a real inflammation response because I was lacking in a lot of vitamins like zinc and selenium and magnesium. And once I was able to correct those, I've made such difference, and now I'm finally kind of at a state where I'm not breaking out in rashes and my skin is
Mm.
actually healing. So I've kind of had that breakthrough, but it's been quite a journey. I've actually gone through quite a few different kind of diets and things to address it. But then I came back, interestingly enough, to the heavy metals testing again, because I was like, well, I've had success with that. So we're going to come back to that. And I kind of looked at, I was lucky enough to be given a book, or be told to read a book about postnatal depletion. And basically it talked about the copper zinc ratio. And I was like, when I read about how when that's out, all the symptoms married up with mine, which was really amazing. So I was like able, and I was, so when I got the head, that's my kind of secondary hair testing, I kind of knew what the results were going to be anyway, and they did. They were reflective of being really high in copper, which can be really thrown out when you're pregnant and having children. And if you're not getting zinc, you're getting too much copper. And when I examined our diet's really great, but it's also very high in copper. And also, I think we'd moved house, so our tap water was high in copper, and all these things that we kind of had taken for granted because we were sort of like, oh, well, copper's good for you, it's fine, but it's not so good when you don't have enough zinc in your system. So yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
kind of learned that the hard way.
that's super interesting, because then I also see the other spectrum where people have been supplementing with zinc for a long time, thinking they're doing the right thing without blood testing it. And then they end up with really high zinc and issues with their copper levels. And then you know, that's
Yeah.
sort of impacting iron and all the other minerals, which like I wasn't even going to go down this route in the podcast, but it is, yeah, I love mineral testing. Like it's so good because everything's got to sit sort of in that ratio of things, whereas people often just think, oh, just focus on one mineral, and you're like, well, no, because that mineral throws that one out. And you're right, it's
Yeah.
not that whole detoxing system.
Yeah.
So then what's
Eh,
your approach to food now? Just a general whole food diet, or you have quite specific principles you follow?
well, for a while I was on low copper, and so now we're slowly incrementing that incrementing that back in. So for a while I was dairy free, and so I was having lots of all the dairy free milks, so almonds and stuff, which are high in copper. And so I kind of knew and like innately that there was something wrong, that it was actually making things worse. So my diet's really shifted from being very dairy free and sort of not vegan, but I guess more vegetarian. I used to lean towards more vegetarian, and obviously still with a little bit of meat and dairy free. But now I've really made a shift towards like all the high fat diet, which is funny enough. So all the good, like your tallows, your butter, all the vitamin A's and things like that. All these things. All the things that I was so lacking during pregnancy. Because, and I'm not to say that anything's wrong with the vegetarian or like leaning towards that diet or dairy free, but for me it wasn't the right approach necessarily when I'm trying to sustain my body during pregnancy and growing babies. Because I had like babies quite quickly. Like I had 4 pregnancies, gosh, in 4 years. And so it kind of takes its toll on your body. And if you're not feeding the right foods, it's not going to help. So all those like fat soluble vitamins I wasn't getting. And so I've really made a shift to that. And wow, I can honestly say my skin is amazing now. Like my skin generally glows as long as I'm not too tired.
Yeah. And then tied in with that, your focus would be around obviously avoiding processed foods and prioritizing organic foods where you can, I assume.
Yeah, definitely.
Obviously there is a budget element in that for a lot of people as well when it comes to
So what we do is like when I first initiated like going through a big health journey is that I firstly initiated removing processed foods completely. And well, what it make like simply that difference can make in your life basically, because you're removing a lot of those inflammatory foods as well if you're removing processed foods. So like the first layer I would do if you're trying to approach health and trying to make changes that are within budget is simply going whole foods, and in fact and going unprocessed, because in fact you actually save money because you're not buying all these sauces and all these other things. You're making them from scratch from spices, and it's much easier than you think once you kind of know how. But then you can kind of move down to the next layer, which we try and eat organic as much as possible on things we can source as well. So we get in veggie boxes and things like that. But my husband reminded me, quite frankly, last week, he's like, we're better to eat the vegetables even if they're not organic than not eat them at all. So I think that's like a key message as well. It's like, it's great if you can eat organic and find as much food so that you're reducing your exposure to unnecessary toxins, but it's not the be all or end all either.
Yeah, and then also within that, it's like, well, there's so many vegetables that you can prepare in a way to reduce the toxin load as well. You're washing or you're peeling, or like your bananas or whatever it is, like foods where you kind of like, okay, well, is there ones, if my budget's limited, what ones are kind of the ones I want to pick as my organic ones, and what ones can I sort of surpass on or only do it occasionally as well. Like I feel like there's quite a scale there you can work with.
Yeah, we actually did like a wee while ago. We actually looked into it for ourselves more specifically on what foods were worth organic and what foods are okay to buy conventionally. And so we did a big table for ourselves, and then we were like, actually, this would be amazing information for other people as well, because we're all kind of on tight budgets, particularly with the cost of living now as well, to then know what to prioritize. So I kind of did a nice wee table that shows you the things that ideally you should buy organic, things that are sort of okay either way, and things that are okay to buy conventionally. So this is based off a lot of the MPI data with specific to New Zealand, and we've also looked at Australia and worldwide data about pesticides residues and what's sprayed, and also the kind of like risk factors with those sprays and how risky is that spray to your health if they're using that on that, I guess, that fruit or veg. So yeah, we've kind of looked at a lot of that data across the board to get kind of an overview of what is worth buying organic and what's okay to buy conventionally.
Is it online with like the clean and the dirty dozen? Like, does it you're up with that kind of like
it does.
The porous ones are like your spinach and berries are really highly sprayed, whereas okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And so potatoes are the kind of one of the non-negotiables in our house. Those sort of root potatoes, because they spray them quite heavily to stop them from seeding, and also they spray them to make it easier for them to, I guess, harvest as well. So there's like some real risk factors, and they're a root vegetable, so they soak up a lot of junk as well. So that's kind of one of the big non-negotiables. And as you mentioned, like berries.
What about carrots, actually, out of interest?
Oh gosh, carrots. I think they sit in like the medium range. I have to like remember because we always buy organic carrots because
Yeah,
they're always available. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
like
Interesting.
yeah, I would lean towards organic with carrot anyway, just because they are more readily available and
Mm.
they are a root vegetable as well. So
Yeah, I didn't even think of that because I like, yeah, like I don't buy a heap of greens particularly, but like, yeah, lots of potatoes. But I remember someone saying that the other day because I didn't really think about it with potatoes for some reason. Whereas like a lot of my other veggies and stuff, I'll buy organic where I can. But yeah, I'm like, oh, that it does make sense though. You're right because they're a root vegetable, I suppose.
yeah, and it's just a poor harvesting practice to make life easier. They're
Yes.
spraying it, so
Yeah.
it's not helpful in that regard. Yeah.
So beyond food, what are some of your other big ones? I'm guessing water and I'm guessing cooking items and plastic.
Cleaning products, particularly for mums. Like we're cleaning all day, every day, and we're spraying these things that are airborne, and you don't want to be inhaling a lot of junk as well. So cleaning products are like a big one. That was one of the first. Along the lines of food, that was one of the first things I switched out and started making myself when I first had my first Peter. It was one of the first things I did was switch out all my cleaning products because they are so, so toxic. Like, and you're inhaling a lot of this stuff and you're using it every day.
And what do you cook with? Because there's a mix like of different things that I hear people like, some people are all cast iron and some are same stainless steel. What's your go-to for cooking supplies?
Well, it's actually interesting because I looked at all the different materials to cook in, and
Yeah.
all of them have an element where they leach some form of toxin. So,
Mm.
for instance, cast iron might leak iron or cadmium, and then you have stainless steel, which can leach nickel. So there's not really like this. I kind of despaired when I looked at it because I was like, oh, there isn't necessarily a perfect solution. Glass is probably the best, but then like so my kind of approach is that I use different materials so that you kind of are not getting heavily exposed to too much iron or too much nickel or what have you. So we're kind of mixed between stainless steel, glass, and cast iron in our household.
Mm.
Yeah, so I
Yeah.
don't specifically cook with just one thing. And if I'm cooking something acidic, I might lean towards not using cast iron, but then using stainless steel.
Yeah, yeah. That
Yeah.
makes sense. And that's, yeah, a way, like a really good, simple approach to it. Because I do think that, like, when you sort of do that research into the low tox, I was kind of like, oh, cast iron or stainless steel or what, but to have a varieties. And I love, like, certain elements, I love cooking with cast iron and other things. I'm like, things just seem to stick if you haven't, like, worn it in properly. And it's like,
Yeah.
there's so many of those little things that come up, especially when we're used to like a quick non-stick pan. In a sense, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, definitely it is. Yeah, so my approach is just use variety as opposed to just one singular material. Yeah.
Do you have a water filtering system on your whole house, or do you have a nice watering filter system at home, or how do you go about that?
Yeah, so we have a household filter on, and
Mm,
then we also have a waters filter for our bench top, which kind of remineralizes it and makes sure that it removes everything. So it's sort of like a double kind of filtration system. It might not be necessary, but we're kind of cautious because body is like water is
yeah.
can be a massive source of toxins as well.
Yeah. Oh, it's water's huge. Like that's probably one of the biggest ones, and it's quite a. Some people it's still quite a headspace to change it, or they're like, is a jug enough? Like, is a Brita jug actually doing enough, or do I need a whole system on my house, or can I have a
Mm.
standalone system that's got the different filters through it? Like, and there's such a spectrum in price as well. So people are like, where do I start? Am I spending $1,000? Am I spending $20? Like, how? It's I don't know. I feel like
Yeah.
it's a minefield with water.
It really is, but you actually just want to look at the microns of the filter and whether or not the size of the microns and the element that you're trying to remove. And then, because a lot of the time they'll say you need this big $2,000 system and you don't, because it will only remove just as much as the same cheaper one as long as the micros is small enough. But anyway, that's kind of like one of the blessings I have with my husband, who's like an engineer. So he kind of understands all this stuff a little bit more than other people. So
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, I love that. That's good. That's super helpful because, like you said, like it's those little things. So people like I don't know. You're just going off buying a water filter system based on the fact that you think it's the right thing to do. But I love the remineralizing stuff as well, because that's probably one of the biggest things that are pushed with the women inside the root cause program is mineral dense foods, like obviously your ghee and your liver and your oysters and stuff like that. But then also trace mineral drops and remineralizing our diets, because so often we're just mineral depleted, and that kind of comes back to your hair mineral testing. But it can be
Yeah.
the quote unquote simplest things that make the big difference. And someone once said to me, your minerals are the spark plugs of the body. Like you need those in balance for everything else, for to fight your gut infections, to have healthy hormones, to do all that stuff. And it's just, yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's the foundation of everything that we're doing in a sense.
Yeah, definitely. I can't agree enough. I like that analogy of the spark plug. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like this whole hormonal balance thing, because when you look at a hair trace mineral analysis, you can see if the thyroid's out or the hormones are out, or if you've got a gut infection based on the mineral balance in a sense. Like
Yeah.
it's super interesting. Is there anything else that you go, oh yeah, that's kind of a non-negotiable for me? Because you've talked a little bit about food, a little bit about cleaning products, a little bit about cooking products and water. Is there other things that you feel like are a big part of our life that
I
skincare probably?
yeah, I really reckon cosmetics and skincare are a huge source of toxins, more than people realize. And I can think of an immediate example where I've recently read about a lady who was diagnosed with breast cancer, and wow, like, and it was caused by the product she was using. So I don't think people really realize the connection, and they just assume everything that's sitting on the supermarket shelf or wherever you purchase, like if I say farmers in New Zealand, that it's all safe, but it's not 100% safe, and they don't completely always understand the effects of each chemical they're adding into a product either.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a huge one, because I see that in the Dutch testing, like the comprehensive hormone testing, in that phase one of the liver, where you can see sort of what pathway estrogen's pushing down. And often, if it's pushing down that breast cancer pathway, it is often driven by a high exposure to toxins, to skincare, to environmental, like mimickers of estrogen in a sense. I mean, there's alcohol and caffeine, which can drive it as well, but generally it's driven by external environmental toxins or plastics and stuff, and like people still heating stuff up in plastics and doing dumb stuff like that. In that sense, I'm sorry for anyone listening, but please don't do that.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, like, not heating in plastic is another non-negotiable. And I am terribly guilty of this. When I was working, I used to have this lovely little work colleague, and he would come up to me, and he would be like, Sarah, you need to stop heating your food in plastic. And I'm like, oh, what are you talking about? It's absolutely fine. But now I look at it and I'm like, oh my goodness, I cannot believe I did that. And once you learn about how much it's leaching into your food, you can never undo that. You can never heat your food in plastic again. It's shocking. But
No. And
yeah.
once you make that transition to glass or whatever, I can't remember whatever the name of the other type of container I have is, but once you transition all your containers and stuff to that, then it's not even really an option. But then even like putting food away at night, like if I do a massive slow cooker meal and I'm like, well, I don't want to be chucking that in plastics, like it just, and you watch what plastics do when you go in the microwave, and if they shrink
Yeah.
sometimes, you're like, this cannot, like all those microwavable meals like that people have, I'm like, this can't be good. Like how can we think that this can be good for us?
Yeah, definitely. Like, yeah, I forget about the microwave meals, like how many people are doing that, and then also the junk in them. Like, oh my goodness.
But I wonder, like, I think so much of it is like an awareness and education, because you think about like your platform and the awareness you're bringing to people, which I just love, even on the simple daily stuff, like I said, tampons or condoms or things that we don't really think about, or even like herbal teas and the microplastics and things in the
Yeah.
poor quality stuff. Like a lot of that. Firstly, there's got to be that awareness and that education, and then it's got to be like a easy kind of shift in a sense, like buying a plastic container versus buying a glass container. That's a very doable thing to do, right? Changing all your cookware at once, probably a bit more of an expense. So it's something you do over time, or buying a
Yeah.
water filter. But it's like, firstly, we need people like you going, hey, there's got to be some kind of awareness, and then sort of breaking it down and going, actually, swap swap this for that and sort of keep it sustainable. Because like you said, as a mum and on a budget, or, even as a single on a budget, it is really hard.
Yeah, it is. And I think like one of the biggest lessons I've learned over time is that you can't do it all and be perfect. It's just about making changes as you can, because those little changes lead into big changes. Like I can say I wasn't in the first part of my health journey. I was certainly not eating organic, and I
Yeah.
wasn't probably completely plastic free at that stage because I didn't have the knowledge. And as we learned, we changed things, and as we could,
Yeah.
as our budget allowed, we've changed things. And even now, I'm still within our budget, I'm still changing things slowly. Like there's still things that I want to improve in our house that we're not perfect on either.
Yeah, but like anything, something's better than nothing, like it's
Yeah,
like
exactly.
one of those small things where you're like, okay, what can I do? Where can I start today? And just sort of change it slowly. But like I said, like I love your Instagram for that. And for those listening, it's just Low Toxin Rabbit. And I mean, your website's the same,
Yeah.
www.lowtoxinrabbit.com. And I just feel like you break it down and you do keep it simple and go, hey, swap this for that. So I love what you do and I really appreciate it. And I do think having more people like you who make it achievable and doable, it just doesn't feel like that same overwhelming load.
Yeah, well, that's really good. Thank you for that, because I'm also happy to ask any questions. Like if someone has something specific that they can't find on my blog, I'm always happy to answer that question, because a lot of the time it's something that I've definitely thought about, but I just
Yes.
haven't had time to
Yeah.
translate it onto my blog yet, because I'm a busy mum of 3 children, and I'm also now currently homeschooling, so it makes me even busier. And so I have all this information in my mind of all these things that we've looked at, that I haven't quite got there. So if anyone has any questions, I'm always happy to answer them, because it's highly likely that it's something
Yeah.
that I've thought about.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. And I'm sure everyone listening will go have a stalk and a listen and probably ask you questions. But if you could sort of give one sort of tip or starting point for people, sort of where would you point them in the direction if they are feeling like a really busy or overwhelmed mum and is like, holy moly, I don't even know what one thing to start with or how do I organize my thought patterns around this? What was really helpful for you in the early days?
It's definitely just focusing on changing one thing at a time. So I think really like I like to kind of take the approach of what you put in and then focus on the external. So really food. So just removing processed food. So it might be simply by just cooking a meal from scratch every night. And then maybe you might still be having some processed snacks during the day to get through, but you're still having one meal that's good for you and wholesome. And then eventually you'll slowly increment more and more things. You'll start making your own snacks, or you'll come up with solutions like you don't even need to make things to have healthy snacks, a piece of fruit or some nuts, things like that. And you just have to grin and bear with yourself, because it takes time to make change. And so it's just implementing one thing at a time and creating new habits slowly. And then eventually it will kind of all compound. So really food, like focusing on what you're taking in, because that's the thing that's going to impact your body immediately. And then focusing on the external secondary. That would be kind of my approach. And not thinking that you have to change overnight and change everything, because we have these habits. I know there are people that are super really low tox, but they still love their Sunlight dishwashing liquid and they won't give it up. And that's okay, because you're doing a lot of other things over here to help reduce your load. So it's not about being perfect. It's just about
Yeah.
making changes.
Yeah, because you start going down a rabbit hole of bed sheets and pillows and mold in the home and like making sure you've got plants in the house and just like monitor. Like there are like, and some things are easy changes and other things like that you don't always think about. Like I said, like pillows or whatever, and then you start going, shivers, I need to change everything in my whole house. Like it can feel, but like you said, when you sort of strip it back and go, okay, I'm having microwave lunches. What can I swap that out for? That might be just as convenient. And whether that's, rice and some simple protein and a little bit of veg, or whether, like you said, like you're swapping some of your pre-made snacks for just yogurt and you chuck in a glass container with a few fresh berries or a bit of fruit and going, okay, this is my swap. And just how can I, keep that sort of sustainable and in my budget as well.
Yeah. It's just about keeping it simple and just making small changes, because as you make small changes, you'll make more and more as the time goes on. And
Yeah.
like, for instance, I think about pillows and I'm like, oh, we probably need to change our pillows and all these things as well still. But I really like, just because I'm so busy as a mum, I just focus
Yeah.
really on what we're eating,
Yeah.
is one of our main points, and then everything
The
else kind of
rest.
flows from there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for jumping on today, Sarah. I really, really appreciate it. And for those listening who do want to learn more or know more, like I said, lowtoxinrabbit.com is the website, or on Instagram, or Low Toxin Rabbit on TikTok as well is the best places to find Sarah, to see her information, or to flick her a question and ask her. So, yeah, thank you. We really appreciate your knowledge, and I love the work that you're doing in this space.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. And I hope you have a lovely afternoon and evening.